I need to tell someone what I did, and you're going to think I'm terrible. But there's something about relationships that nobody really wants to admit. Sometimes you get so caught up in knowing your worth that you forget the other person has worth too. Everyone's calling me delusional now, saying I got exactly what I deserved, but they don't know what was actually going through my head when I said those words to Marcus. They don't know about the 8 months leading up to that moment, or why I genuinely believed I was doing us both a favor by being honest. If I don't tell this story the right way, you'll just think I'm another entitled woman who thought she was too good for a good man. But once you know what I know about how we got together, about what my friend said, about what I'd been through before him, you'll understand why those words came out of my mouth. You might still think I was wrong. Actually, you probably will. But at least you'll understand that I wasn't trying to be cruel. I was trying to be real. I'm going to tell you everything, including the part where I doubled down after he started packing. And the part that makes me look worst, I'm saving that for later because you need to understand how I got to be the person who could say something like that in the first place. So here's the truth. I told Marcus he was lucky I even chose him, and he didn't argue. He didn't yell. He didn't try to change my mind. He just packed up his stuff and left my apartment without saying a single word. And I stood there watching him, convinced that he'd come back within a day or two once he realized what he was giving up. That was 4 months ago. I met Marcus at my friend Simone's birthday party almost 2 years ago. I wasn't even supposed to go because I was still recovering from my previous relationship with David, who'd been, objectively speaking, a catch on paper. Investment banker, 6 feet tall, drove a BMW, had an apartment in the nice part of downtown. We dated for a year and a half before I found out he was still sleeping with his ex-girlfriend the entire time. The betrayal wasn't even the worst part. The worst part was how stupid I felt for not seeing it coming, for being so dazzled by the surface that I missed all the signs underneath. After David, I promised myself I'd be smarter. I'd have standards. I'd never again settle or ignore red flags just because a guy looked good from the outside. So when I showed up at Simone's party, I wasn't looking for anything. I was actually planning to leave early until Marcus struck up a conversation with me by the drinks table. He was sweet, kind of shy, wearing a button-up shirt that looked like he'd ironed it himself. He worked in it at a mid-sized company. He drove a Honda Civic. He lived in a 1-bedroom apartment in a neighborhood that was, to be generous, up and coming. We talked for 3 hours that night. He made me laugh. He asked questions about me that showed he was actually listening to my answers. When I mentioned I loved this obscure indie band, he didn't pretend to know them to seem cool. He just asked me to tell him more about their music. I wasn't attracted to him at first. I need to be honest about that. When I got home that night and he texted me asking if I wanted to get coffee sometime, I almost said no. But Simone had texted me earlier saying Marcus is such a good guy, you should give him a chance, and I thought about how good on paper had worked out for me. Maybe good guy was what I needed to try. Our first date was nice. Comfortable. He took me to this little coffee shop he loved, and we sat there talking until they literally started stacking chairs around us. Our second date was a walk through the botanical gardens. Our third date was dinner at an Italian place where he admitted he'd called ahead to make sure they had vegetarian options because he remembered I didn't eat meat. By the fourth date, I was starting to feel something. Not fireworks, but something warm and steady. Something that felt like it could grow into more. We made it official after 2 months. My friends were supportive mostly. Simone was thrilled. My friend Rachel said he seemed really nice. But my friend Tanya, who I'd known since college and who had always been the most successful of all of us, professional model, always dating athletes or executives, she raised an eyebrow when I showed her a photo of us together. He's cute, she said in that tone that meant the exact opposite. Seems sweet. He is sweet, I said, defensive already. No, that's great, you deserve sweet after the David situation. She paused, sipping her wine. Are you really into him though, like really? Question bothered me more than it should have. Because the truth was I was into him, just maybe not in the consuming, can't breathe kind of way I'd been into David. But that intensity had been toxic, right? That intensity had blinded me to obvious red flags. I'm happy, I told Tanya. Isn't that what matters? Of course, she said quickly. I'm just saying you're a catch, Jess. You could have anyone, just make sure you're not settling because you're scared of getting hurt again. That word, settling. It planted itself in my brain like a seed. Marcus and I fell into a comfortable rhythm over the next several months. He'd come over to my place most weekends because honestly my apartment was nicer. I'd worked hard to afford my 1-bedroom in a good neighborhood and I took pride in it. His place was fine, but it was small and kind of dark and in an area where I didn't feel comfortable parking my car on the street overnight. He never seemed bothered that we always stayed at my place. He'd bring groceries and cook for me, these elaborate meals that took him hours. He'd rub my feet while we watched TV. He remembered the names of all my coworkers even though I worked with like 20 people and they all had complicated drama. But Tanya's question kept echoing. Was I really into him, or was I just comfortable? I started noticing little things. The way my coupled-up friends would talk about their boyfriends, and fiancée Rachel was dating a guy who just made partner at his law firm. Simone's boyfriend had surprised her with a trip to Paris for her birthday. Even my coworker Amy was engaged to a guy who owned his own business. And then there was Marcus, who was sweet and steady, and made a decent living but nothing spectacular. Who drove a Honda Civic while I drove a Lexus that I'd saved for years to buy. Who seemed perfectly content with our quiet weekends, and while I sometimes wondered if we should be doing more, being more, wanting more. Just when I thought I had these feelings under control, Tanya invited me to a yacht party that one of her boyfriend's friends was throwing. "Bring Marcus," she said. "It'll be fun." I almost didn't tell Marcus about it, I don't know why. Maybe part of me already knew how it would feel to have him there in that environment, surrounded by men in expensive watches and women in designer dresses. But he asked me what I was doing that weekend, and the lie wouldn't come, so I invited him. He seemed excited. He wore his best shirt, the navy one that actually fit him really well. He held my hand as we walked up the dock to the yacht, and I felt this complicated swirl of affection and embarrassment that I hated myself for feeling. The party was exactly what I'd expected. Tanya's boyfriend Derek was there with all his finance bros, talking loudly about crypto and real estate investments. The women were talking about boutique fitness classes and vacation homes. And Marcus stood next to me, trying to follow conversations about things he clearly knew nothing about, smiling politely while men interrupted him or talked over him. At one point Derek asked Marcus what he did, and when Marcus explained he worked in IT, Derek literally said, "Oh, like tech support, that's cool man, we all need our computer guys." And then he laughed and turned back to his friend to continue some story about bottle service at a club. Marcus took it in stride. He squeezed my hand and smiled at me like he was having a perfectly nice time, but I felt hot with something I couldn't name. Shame, anger, disappointment. On the drive home, Marcus said, "Your friends are nice, that was quite a party." "You don't have to be polite," I said. "I know Derek was kind of a dick to you." "Oh, that nah, I didn't take it personally. Guys like that just like to peacock, doesn't bother me." And that was the thing, it didn't bother him. He was so secure in himself, so unbothered by the posturing and status games. I thought I'd find that attractive. Instead, I found myself wishing he'd been bothered. Wishing he'd shown some edge, some ambition, some desire to prove himself. I thought I was fixing my thinking, examining these shallow impulses and trying to be better. But really I was starting to build a case. Over the following months I started keeping a mental list. Not consciously at first, but it was there. All the ways Marcus was safe but not exciting, comfortable but not impressive, sweet but not ambitious. He got passed over for a promotion at work and seemed only mildly disappointed. "There'll be other opportunities," he said with a shrug. Meanwhile, I'd been aggressively networking and angling for advancement at my marketing firm. He was content with his Honda Civic while I was already planning what I'd upgrade to next. He was happy with our quiet routine while I found myself fantasizing about the life I could have with someone more driven, more successful, more everything. I started declining his invitations sometimes. "I have to work late," I'd say, which was true maybe half the time. The other half I just wanted space to breathe, to remember who I was before I became part of Marcus and Jessica. My friends noticed. Simone asked me if everything was okay with us. "You seem distant lately," she said. "I'm just busy with work," I told her, which again wasn't entirely a lie. I'd been taking on extra projects, staying late at the office, building my career in ways that felt important and validating. Tanya saw right through me. "You're checking out," she said over drinks one night. "I can tell you've got that look." "What look?" "The look of someone who's already halfway out the door but doesn't want to be the bad guy." She leveled her gaze at me. "Are you going to break up with him?" I should have been offended by the question, but instead I felt relieved that someone had said it out loud. "I don't know, maybe. Is that terrible?" "It's not terrible to want more, Jess. You're allowed to have standards." There was that word again, standards, like Marcus was failing some test when really he was just being himself. The same self I'd liked well enough to date for over a year. But Tanya's validation felt good. It felt like permission. I didn't break up with him though, not then. Instead, I let things drift. I was less available, less enthusiastic, less present even when we were together. And Marcus, sweet Marcus, just tried harder. He'd surprise me with my favorite takeout. He'd send me encouraging texts before big meetings. He'd rub my shoulders when I complained about work stress. Every kind thing he did made me feel worse. Not because it softened me toward him, but because it highlighted the growing gap between what he felt and what I felt. He was all in. I was shopping around in my head, comparing him to hypothetical men who had more money, more status, more ambition. The breaking point started building about 8 months into our relationship. I got promoted to senior marketing manager, a huge jump that came with a significant raise and a lot more responsibility. I was thrilled. I went out with my work friends to celebrate, and one of them, a guy named Chris from the sales department, was particularly congratulatory. Chris was exactly the kind of guy I'd trained myself not to want. Charming, ambitious, a little cocky. The kind of guy who wore expensive suits and closed big deals and talked about his career like it was a war he was winning. We'd flirted mildly before, the kind of office banter that doesn't quite cross lines but dances near them. That night, celebrating my promotion, the banter went further. Not into inappropriate territory, but far enough that I felt the thrill of it. The attention from someone who seemed like he was on my level, professionally and socially. I came home late, a little drunk, feeling good about myself. Marcus had texted earlier asking if I wanted him to come over and celebrate, but I told him I was just going out with work people and would talk to him tomorrow. When I did talk to him the next day, he asked how the celebration went and I felt annoyed by the question. Annoyed that I had to report to him, annoyed that he was sitting at home while I was out living my life, annoyed by the inequality of it all. Was fine, I said shortly. Just fine, come on, this is huge, you should be proud. I am proud. Want me to take you out to celebrate properly? I was thinking that nice restaurant you mentioned wanting to try. The nice restaurant I'd mentioned was expensive. Too expensive, I thought at the time, for Marcus's budget. The fact that he was offering now felt almost patronizing, like he was trying to play at a level he couldn't actually sustain. You don't have to do that, I said. I want to. You deserve it. There it was again, you deserve it, like he was granting me something, like he had the authority to decide what I deserved. Maybe another time, I said. I'm pretty tired from last night. We didn't end up going to that restaurant. We didn't end up doing anything special to celebrate. Life just continued in its regular rhythm, except now I had more work, more responsibility, more reasons to be busy and unavailable. Marcus never complained. Not once. He just adjusted to my schedule, making himself available whenever I had time, grateful for whatever scraps of attention I could spare. And somehow his accommodation made me respect him less. I know how that sounds. Believe me, I know. Here was a man who was patient and understanding and supportive, and I found those qualities insufficient. What does that say about me? But I couldn't help how I felt. I couldn't manufacture attraction or respect that was fading. And everyone around me, especially Tanya, kept reinforcing that I deserved more, that I shouldn't settle, that I was a catch who could have anyone I wanted. It all came to a head on a random Tuesday night, 3 months after my promotion. Marcus came over with groceries to make dinner. I was tired from a long day and not really in the mood for company, but I hadn't seen him in almost a week because I'd been so busy, so I let him in. He started cooking while I sat at my kitchen counter, half watching him and half scrolling through my phone. He was telling me some story about his coworker, something lighthearted and funny, clearly trying to cheer me up. I was barely listening. I was looking at Instagram, at Tanya's photos from a weekend getaway her boyfriend had surprised her with, at Rachel's engagement ring that had probably cost more than Marcus made in 3 months. At all these lives that seemed so much bigger and more exciting than mine. Jess, you okay? I looked up. Marcus was watching me with concern, wooden spoon in hand, wearing the apron I kept at my place just for him, and something in me just snapped. Can I ask you something? I said, of course. Do you ever want more than this? He looked confused. More than what? More than your job, your apartment, your car, your life. Do you ever want to push for more? His confusion deepened into something that looked like hurt. I mean, sure, I'd like to move up eventually, but I'm pretty happy with things as they are. I have a good job, a nice place, and I'm with you. That's what matters to me. But don't you want to be ambitious? Don't you want to achieve things, build something bigger? I guess I don't think about it the same way you do. He set down the spoon. Where is this coming from? I just think we're at different places in our lives. I'm moving forward in my career, I have goals and plans, and you're just kind of coasting. The words came out harsher than I'd intended, but once they were out there, I couldn't take them back. And part of me didn't want to. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. I'm not coasting, Jess. I'm living my life in a way that makes me happy. I'm sorry if that's not ambitious enough for you. It's not about ambition, it's about wanting more for yourself, for us. What do you want for us that we don't have? I didn't have a good answer to that. A nicer apartment, fancier restaurants, Instagram-worthy vacations. The truth was I wanted the feeling of being with someone impressive. Someone I could brag about to Tanya and my other friends. Someone who made me feel like I'd won. Marcus was still waiting for an answer. The sauce he was making started to bubble over and he turned to take care of it, his shoulders tense. We didn't talk much for the rest of the evening. He finished making dinner, we ate in uncomfortable silence, and then he went home early saying he had an early morning. I felt relieved when he left. We limped along for another few weeks after that. Marcus tried to act like everything was normal, but there was a new wariness to him. He was more careful with his words, less spontaneous with his affection. I told myself I felt bad about hurting him, but mostly I felt trapped. I started thinking seriously about breaking up with him. I'd rehearsed the conversation in my head during my commute. I think we want different things. We're not compatible long-term. It's not you, it's me, except it actually was him, or rather what he wasn't. But I didn't have that conversation, because every time I got close I'd think about being single again, having to date again, wade through all the guys who were actually terrible to maybe find someone better. And Marcus was good to me objectively. He treated me well. A lot of my single friends would kill for a boyfriend who was as attentive and kind as Marcus. So I stayed, but I'd already checked out emotionally. And I think Marcus knew it, but he didn't want to admit it either. Then came the night that changed everything. We were at my apartment watching TV when Marcus muted the show during a commercial break and turned to me with unusual seriousness. Jess, I need to talk to you about something. My stomach dropped. Was he breaking up with me? Part of me felt panicked, but another part felt almost excited. If he ended it, I wouldn't have to be the bad guy. Okay, I said carefully. I've been thinking a lot about us lately, about our future. He took my hand and my heart started pounding. I love you. I know things have been weird between us lately, and I think I know why. I think you're worried about our future, about whether I'm serious about this. This was not going where I thought it was going. The truth is, I'm completely serious about us. About you, I know I'm not the flashiest guy, I don't have the fanciest job or the most money, but I love you more than I've ever loved anyone, and I'm ready to build a real future with you. Oh no. I've been saving up, he continued, his eyes bright with hope and vulnerability. I know you love your apartment, and I was thinking maybe in a year or so I could move in here, and we could start really planning our life together. Maybe even think about getting engaged. He wanted to move in, he was talking about engagement. He was talking about forever, and all I could think was that I didn't want this. I didn't want him. I didn't want a future with someone who needed a year to save up to afford half my rent. The thought was cruel and I knew it, but I couldn't unfeel it. Marcus, I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything right now. I just wanted you to know I'm all in. I'm committed to this, to us. He squeezed my hand. I know I'm lucky to have you. And that's when I said it. The words that I'd been thinking for months but had never voiced until they just came spilling out. You're lucky I even chose you in the first place. His face changed instantly. The hope, the vulnerability, all of it shut down like someone had flipped a switch. He let go of my hand. What did you just say? I should have backtracked. I should have softened it, explained what I meant, apologized. But I was so tired of pretending, so exhausted from months of feeling like I was settling and trying to talk myself out of that feeling. I just mean that objectively I had a lot of options and I chose you. I chose you even though you're not what I'd usually go for, even though my friends questioned it. I gave you a chance when I could have been with someone more on my level. The silence that followed was deafening. Marcus stood up slowly. He didn't look angry. He looked devastated, and then somehow worse, he looked like he was making a decision. You're right, he said quietly. You did choose me, and I thought that meant something different than what you apparently think it means. Marcus, come on, I'm just being honest. No, you're being clear, finally. He walked toward my door where he'd left his jacket. You're being really, really clear. Where are you going? I need to leave. You're upset. Let's talk about this. He turned back to face me, and his expression was calmer than it had any right to be. There's nothing to talk about, Jess. You just told me exactly what you think of me, what you've probably thought this whole time. I didn't mean it like that. Yeah, you did. He put on his jacket. And you know what? You're probably right. You probably could have someone more impressive. Someone richer, more ambitious, more whatever it is you're looking for, so go find him. Marcus, don't do this. Don't make this into a thing. I was just being honest about how relationships work. People make choices. I chose you. He shook his head slowly, and I saw something I'd never seen before in his eyes: disappointment. Not in himself, but in me. The thing is, Jess, I chose you too. But when I said I was lucky to have you, I meant I was grateful. I meant I appreciated you, valued you, felt fortunate that we found each other. You think I'm lucky like I won some lottery I didn't deserve. Like you did me a favor. I didn't say that. You absolutely said that. He opened the door. I'm going to get my stuff. What stuff? All the stuff I've left here over the past year and a half. I'll be back tomorrow when you're at work. You're breaking up with me over this? He paused in the doorway. You already broke up with me, Jess. Months ago, you just didn't bother to tell me. And then he left. I stood there in my apartment, in the space where just moments ago he'd been talking about moving in, about getting engaged, about a future together. The sauce he'd been making earlier was still in the pot on the stove, starting to congeal. I waited for him to come back. I was sure he'd cool down and realize he was overreacting. Sure, what I'd said was harsh, but it was also true, wasn't it? And don't people always say honesty is important in relationships? He didn't come back that night. The next day at work, I kept checking my phone, expecting a text. Maybe an angry one, maybe a sad one, but nothing came. When I got home that evening, I saw immediately that things were missing. His spare clothes from my closet, his toothbrush from my bathroom, the book he'd been reading from my nightstand, the apron from the kitchen, his favorite mug, the phone charger he kept plugged in by my couch. He'd taken everything efficiently and completely, like he was removing all evidence that he'd ever been part of my life. There was no note. I called him. It went to voicemail. I texted him. The message showed as delivered but not read. I called again, voicemail again, and that's when panic started to set in, not because I was devastated to lose him, but because I hadn't decided I was done yet. He was supposed to come back and apologize for overreacting, and then I was supposed to decide whether to forgive him or end things on my terms. He wasn't supposed to just leave. I called Simone, who already knew. Apparently Marcus had texted her letting her know he wouldn't be able to make her dinner party next week because we'd broken up. What happened? She asked, and I could hear the accusation in her voice. We had a fight. He's being dramatic. Marcus isn't dramatic, Jess. What did you fight about? I gave her a sanitized version, leaving out the specific words I'd used. She was quiet for a long moment. Give him space, she finally said. If you care about him, give him space to process. But I didn't want to give him space. I wanted him to respond, to engage, to let me be in control of how this ended. I spent the next few days in a weird limbo. I kept expecting to feel relieved, free, excited about the possibility of meeting someone better. Instead, I felt anxious and off balance. Tanya was thrilled when I told her we'd broken up. Good for you, she said. Now you can find someone who actually deserves you. But her enthusiasm felt hollow, or maybe I was just in a weird mood. By the end of the first week, I convinced myself I should reach out again. I crafted a long text message about how we should talk, how what I'd said had come out wrong, how we'd both overreacted. He responded within an hour. The first contact in 7 days. I appreciate you reaching out, but I don't think we have anything to talk about. I hope you find what you're looking for. Take care. Polite, distant, final. I stared at that message for a long time, waiting to feel sad. Mostly I felt annoyed. Annoyed that he was handling this with so much dignity when I wanted him to fight for us so I could decide he wasn't worth it. Week 2, I went out with work friends, including Chris from sales. We flirted more openly now that I was single. He bought me drinks, complimented my dress, asked for my number. I gave it to him feeling like this was what I was supposed to want. He texted me that weekend asking me out. We went to a trendy restaurant he chose, the kind of place Marcus would never have picked because it was too expensive and too seen. Why Chris talked about himself most of the night. His sales numbers, his promotion track, his networking strategies. He was confident, ambitious, successful. I was bored out of my mind. But I went out with him again because this was the plan, right? Date someone more on my level, someone impressive, someone I wouldn't be embarrassed to bring around Tanya. On our third date, Chris kissed me and I felt nothing. Actually, worse than nothing. I felt like I was going through motions I was supposed to want to go through. I stopped returning his texts after that. Week 4, I ran into Marcus. Actually, I orchestrated running into him. I knew he played basketball at a certain gym on Saturday mornings because he'd invited me to watch a few times and I'd always said no. I showed up in the parking lot, timing it for when I knew he'd be leaving. When he walked out with his gym bag, sweaty and tired, and saw me leaning against my car, he stopped. Jess, what are you doing here? I wanted to see you to talk. We talked by text. That wasn't really talking. I tried to smile. Can we get coffee or something? He shifted his bag from one shoulder to the other. I don't think that's a good idea. Marcus, come on, we dated for a year and a half. We can't even have a conversation. What do you want to talk about? About us, about what happened. You told me I was lucky you chose me, that you could have been with someone more on your level. I think that covered it. Hearing it repeated back to me in his calm, matter-of-fact voice made it sound worse than I remembered. I was frustrated. I said something I didn't mean. You meant it, Jess, and honestly, you were probably right. You probably can find someone better, someone richer, more ambitious, more whatever it is you value. But that person isn't me, and I'm not going to audition to be someone I'm not. I'm not asking you to be someone else. Yeah, you are. You have been for months, and I tried to be more exciting, more ambitious, more enough. But I can't compete with whatever fantasy version you have in your head of who you deserve. That's not fair, isn't it? For the first time, he looked angry. Not loud or aggressive, but truly angry. You want to know what's not fair? Loving someone who's embarrassed by you, being grateful for someone who thinks they're doing you a favor, trying to build a future with someone who's constantly looking over your shoulder to see if there's someone better. I never said I was embarrassed. You didn't have to. He adjusted his bag again. I'm going to go. Please don't come to my gym again. He walked to his car, and this time I let him go. I thought that would be closure. That seeing him, hearing him say those things would help me move on. Instead, I felt worse. Because the thing is, he was right about all of it. I had been embarrassed by him. I had thought I was doing him a favor. I had been looking for someone better while keeping him as a safety net. And now he was gone and I was supposed to feel free, but instead I felt empty. Months passed. I went on dates here and there. None of them went anywhere. The guys who were impressive on paper turned out to be boring or self-absorbed or just not that into me. The guys who were nice reminded me of Marcus, which made me feel guilty, which made me pull away. Work was going well. I got another promotion. I moved to an even nicer apartment. On paper, my life was exactly what I'd wanted. But something was missing, and I couldn't figure out what. Tanya's relationship with Derek imploded spectacularly when she found out he'd been cheating on her with 2 different women. She was devastated, and I tried to be supportive, but I found myself resenting her too. All her advice about not settling, about knowing my worth, about deserving more, had led me to throw away something real for something theoretical. Rachel got engaged to her lawyer boyfriend, and the wedding planning consumed her life. Her fiancé was successful and good-looking and checked all the boxes, but I noticed how he talked over her at dinner, how he made decisions without consulting her, how she was always apologizing for things that weren't her fault. When I mentioned it to Simone, she sighed. Yeah, I've noticed that too, but she seems happy, so who are we to judge? Who were we to judge? Right. Simone was still friends with Marcus. She didn't rub it in my face, but occasionally I'd see comments from him on her Instagram posts, or she'd mention something he'd said. I never asked about him directly, but I absorbed every scrap of information like I was starving for it. He was dating someone new. I found out through a mutual friend's Facebook post, a group photo from someone's birthday party. Marcus was there with a woman I didn't recognize, his arm around her shoulders, both of them smiling. I stared at that photo for an embarrassingly long time, zooming in on her face, her outfit, their body language. She was pretty but not gorgeous. She was dressed casually. She looked normal, regular, like someone Marcus would actually choose, not someone who was slumming it by choosing him. That's when I started to really unravel. I found myself social media stalking, trying to figure out who this woman was. Her name was Amy. She was a teacher. She drove a Toyota. Her Instagram was full of photos with friends and family, pictures of her classroom, wholesome content about books and hiking and her dog. She looked happy. Marcus looked happy. And I was sitting in my expensive apartment with my successful career, with all the things I'd thought I wanted, feeling absolutely miserable. I did something I'm not proud of. I texted Marcus on what would have been our 2-year anniversary if we'd stayed together. Hey. I know this is random, but I was thinking about you today, hope you're doing well. He responded the next day. Thanks, you too. That was it, polite, brief, the kind of response you'd give to a distant acquaintance. I stared at those 3 words and felt something crack open inside me. I wanted to text back, to explain, to tell him I'd made a mistake, that I'd been stupid and shallow and wrong about everything. But what would be the point? He'd moved on. He was with someone who probably appreciated him, who didn't think she was doing him a favor by being with him. And I was here, still trying to figure out when exactly I'd become the kind of person who'd throw away something good because it wasn't impressive enough. My therapist, who had started seeing after the breakup for unrelated reasons, had a field day with all of this. It sounds like you valued external validation over internal fulfillment, she said in one session. I just wanted someone I could be proud of, I said defensively. Were you proud of Marcus? I mean, he was a good person. That's not what I asked. Were you proud to be with him? I sat with that question. No, I wasn't. I was embarrassed. Why? Because he wasn't successful enough. Because my friends had boyfriends with better jobs, more money, more status. And how do you feel about that now? I feel like I'm a terrible person. You're not a terrible person. You're a person who internalized some harmful messages about worth and value, but you get to decide whether to keep believing those messages. Easy for her to say. The worst part came about 4 months after the breakup. I was out with work friends at a bar when I saw Marcus walk in with Amy and another couple. My stomach dropped. I hadn't prepared for this, for seeing them together in person. I watched them from across the bar, trying not to be obvious about it. The way he pulled out her chair. The way she laughed at something he said, the easy comfort between them. It was how we used to be in the early days before I'd started keeping score and finding him lacking. Amy got up to go to the bathroom, and in a moment of pure insanity I intercepted her. Hi, sorry, I know this is weird, but you're Amy, right? You're dating Marcus. She looked confused but not unfriendly. Yes, do we know each other? I'm Jess, I'm Marcus's ex. Her expression changed, not hostile but guarded. Oh, hi. I just wanted to say he's a really good guy, you're lucky. Why did I say that? What was I trying to accomplish? Amy studied me for a moment. I know I'm lucky, but I also think he's lucky too. That's kind of how it works when 2 people care about each other. The words hit me like a slap, not because she was being cruel, she wasn't, but because she so clearly didn't understand what I'd been trying to say. To her, luck in a relationship was mutual. To me, it had been a scorecard. Right, I said weakly. Of course, well, I just wanted to say hi. I went back to my friends and made an excuse to leave shortly after. I couldn't watch them anymore. That night, alone in my apartment, I finally let myself cry. Not pretty crying, but ugly, snotty, gasping crying. Because I did something real and I'd thrown it away because it didn't look impressive enough from the outside. I kept thinking about what Marcus had said that last time I saw him at the gym. That I'd been looking for someone better while keeping him as a safety net. That I'd never really chosen him, I just accepted him while waiting for something better to come along. He'd been right. And the thing that killed me was that something better never came. All those impressive guys I thought I deserved. Either they weren't interested in me, or they were just as shallow as I'd been, or they were genuinely awful in ways that made Marcus's supposed shortcomings look ridiculous. Marcus's worst quality had been that he was content with a regular life. He was happy with a normal job and a modest apartment and simple pleasures. He didn't need status or recognition or external validation to feel good about himself. And I'd seen that stability, that security, that contentment, and called it lack of ambition. I'd mistaken peace for complacency. I'd confused humble for inadequate. I thought about all the times he'd made me dinner, rubbed my feet, listened to me complain about work, celebrated my successes without a trace of jealousy or competition. I thought about how safe I'd felt with him, how easy it had been, how he'd loved me without conditions or reservations. And I told him he was lucky I chose him, like he was a contestant who'd won a prize. Like I was the catch and he was the lucky fisherman. Like the entire relationship was him benefiting from my generosity rather than two people choosing each other. My therapist asked me in our next session what I'd learned from all this. That I'm shallow and terrible and I ruined the best relationship I ever had because I cared more about what my friends thought than about actual happiness. Maybe less judgment, more observation. What patterns do you notice? I tie my worth to external things. Achievement, status, what I look like on paper. And I was doing the same thing with relationships. I wanted a boyfriend who looked good on paper, who made me look good by association. And how did that work out? I'm alone in an expensive apartment wondering if I'll ever feel as happy as I did watching Netflix on Marcus's old couch in his mediocre apartment. So what now? That was the question, wasn't it? I thought about reaching out to Marcus again, really reaching out, not just a casual text but a real apology. But what would that accomplish besides making me feel better? He'd moved on, he was happy. Amy seemed nice and normal and like she actually appreciated what she had. The kind thing, maybe the only good thing I could do at this point was leave him alone. So I did. I'm still doing the work, as my therapist calls it, examining why I value what I value, questioning where I learned that a person's worth is tied to their salary and their car and their ambition. Trying to separate what I actually want from what I think I should want. It's hard. Because even now, even knowing everything I know, when I'm out with friends and they're showing off their successful boyfriends, part of me still feels that old inadequacy. That sense that I'm losing some competition I didn't sign up for. But I'm trying to value different things. To see people as whole humans rather than collections of achievements. To understand that someone can be enough without being exceptional. I went on a date last week with a guy I met through a friend. He's a teacher, makes a modest salary, drives an older car. On paper, he's exactly the kind of guy old me would have dismissed, but he was interesting. He was kind. He asked good questions and seemed genuinely interested in the answers. When he talked about his students, his whole face lit up. At the end of the night, he asked if he could see me again. I said yes. I don't know if it'll go anywhere, but I'm trying to show up differently this time. To appreciate what's actually there instead of measuring it against some imaginary standard. My friends don't all get it. Tanya especially keeps trying to set me up with guys she thinks are more my speed, usually finance bros or entrepreneurs or doctors. I've started saying no. Rachel's wedding is next month. I'm a bridesmaid, which means I'll have to watch her marry her successful lawyer who treats her like an accessory. I'll have to smile and celebrate and pretend I don't see the warning signs. But that's her choice, her life, her version of what's important. I'm trying to figure out mine. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd appreciated Marcus while I had him. If I'd met him where he was instead of constantly wishing he was someone else. If I'd understood that being chosen is a gift, not a favor you're granting, we could have been happy. We were happy for a while before I let my insecurities and my need for external validation poison everything good. But I can't go back. I can only go forward, hopefully with more wisdom and less arrogance. The thing nobody tells you about being the villain in your own story is that you still have to live with yourself after. You still have to wake up every morning and be the person who said those words, who felt those things, who threw away something real for something theoretical. I told him he was lucky I even chose him. He packed up and left without a word. And I'm still here, trying to figure out how I became someone who could say something like that to someone who loved me. Still trying to unlearn the toxic math that convinced me some people are worth more than others. Still trying to forgive myself while knowing I don't really deserve forgiveness. Marcus deserved better than me. Amy seems to understand that she doesn't deserve him, that it's mutual, that love isn't a hierarchy. I hope he's happy. I really do. And maybe someday I'll figure out how to be happy too, in a way that doesn't require someone else to be less than me. But right now, 4 months later, I'm just trying to sit with the discomfort of knowing I'm the person who ruined the best thing that ever happened to her because it didn't look good enough from the outside. That's the real confession. Not just that I said those words, but that I meant them. That I believed them. That I looked at genuine love and care and partnership and decided it wasn't enough because it didn't come with the right credentials. I was the lucky one. And I didn't realize it until it was too late.